bring you? I'm trying to take it.
Hey, good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, January 28th special called meeting of the Bethany City Council. I'll call the meeting to order. Would you please stand for the invocation by Councilmember Lundström and remain standing for the flag salute, please.
Father, we come to you tonight to bring this meeting to you and lay it at your feet. We pray that your will be done in all of our lives. And your spirit will rest upon us, and your spirit of discernment and of wisdom, that we would do the right thing for all of our citizens and all of those here on the horseshoe. We pray for each one of us tonight that we would use self-control and wisdom that we normally wouldn't possess. We thank you for our soldiers and those fighting for our freedoms. We thank you for their families and their sacrifices. We bring this meeting to you. Pray these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please face the flag. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. The first item on tonight's agenda is consideration and possible adoption of resolution number 1404, declaring a vacancy in the council position in Ward 1 by reason of the incumbent Councilmember Moore failing to meet the charter residency requirements.
Motion to abandon item number 1. I'm convinced that there's enough information that we have received from the city manager, or excuse me, not the city manager, the city attorney, and from information that Curtis Moore has provided and information that Brian Taylor has provided that proves that Curtis Moore is a resident of the city of Bethany.
I do have new information received about 45 minutes ago that has not been provided yet. It's audio recordings that I do have on my phone, and I would like to share those first.
Do we
Okay.
have a
Do we-
notification?
Do we
Need a
have
second.
a second
You
on
have
the
a
motion?
second for that
Okay.
motion as stated.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Who made the second?
Mr. Moore. Oh, Mr. Shirey. Okay. Any questions or discussion?
Yes, I'd like to share these audio recordings.
Okay.
They are of 3 neighbors living next to the home in Mustang, 21. I don't have the address, but I want to just get right to the point and play these.
That is hearsay, and I object to that. I could play recordings all day long. We could guess at it. I call the vote.
Yeah, well,
It took them a moment to come to the door.
uh,
This is well worth everyone's time, I assure you.
Sorry to bother you. My name is John Herron. I'm a councilman for the city of Bethany. I have a question about the home behind you. Has it ever been occupied?
Yes.
Do you know who lived there?
For a little bit, what was those? Didn't live there very long.
This gentleman by chance?
Yes.
Yes.
Curtis
Moore, yes.
Yeah, Curtis Moore.
How long did he live there?
Okay, he and Kim moved in together in, I want to say maybe it was right before school, because Zoe started school when you did, right?
I think he purchased home about August 15th.
Yeah, I think they moved in near the end of August. I didn't want to keep thinking October, but that wouldn't be right, because, no, she moved out in October. Yeah, she moved out in October, and then he moved out either before Thanksgiving or after. Anyway, they didn't live there very long at all.
Okay.
I think it was after. Yeah, I kind of think it
object to my
Thank you.
personal life being brought out, my dating life being brought out. And I also
This is a
object
home
that that is
right
hearsay.
behind that residence stating you have lived there.
No,
Uh,
if I,
no
what
other
I do with my, what I do with
councilman took
residences.
the opportunity to go down there and speak to them. I felt I did the due diligence for the city of Bethany, going and talking to these neighbors.
I
Mr.
have
Heron,
some
actually,
things.
I went and spoke to
And I
neighbors
have
as well.
another recording of 2 more neighbors stating he lived there 2 to 3 months.
I-
I'm
Excuse me,
That was
just a
Mustang.
moment, I would like to add some information. And let's please, let's.
Go ahead.
Let's just, I would. I'll try to speak a little bit louder so you can hear. Okay. Can you hear me all right? I can hear you. Okay. I would just ask that we try to keep calm. This is a pretty heated item, and I hope that I speak calmly and clearly. And I just want the right thing done all the way around. And I don't want to hurt the city of Bethany. So I would like to talk about a few things. In reference to someone living 3 months out of a year at a different house, we've had council members before that did that. For instance, Tom Ray had a very nice home, not just a lake cabin that you would think, like shabby. Very nice home at the lake. And he would go and spend with his wife 2 or 3 months out of the year there. And you can only have one residence at a time. I have more than one home. Those homes, the utilities are in my name. Does that mean I live there all the time? No. Does it mean I abandoned my home I live at now? No. So these are the things that I have learned from the attorney that we have to prove to say that Curtis Moore is not a resident of the city of Bethany. Must prove that he abandoned his home. Must prove that he had no intention at all to return. He must have acquired and established a new residence. And I don't believe that any of those things have been proven. Again, we had a mayor that had a local builder build him a very nice home over by Lake Overholser. He moved in over, it's not in Bethany. He and his wife moved into that home while he was mayor. And he made the statement when he was living out of Bethany and still the mayor of the city of Bethany that was just his lake home, that he lived at his home that he had in the city of Bethany. So these are all facts in history of what has happened.
Would you clarify who you're speaking about?
J.D. Johnson, Mayor Johnston. Another question you had, Mayor?
No,
Is there another
I just
question?
was
Okay.
asking you to clarify who you were speaking about.
I wasn't speaking about you, if that's what you were asking. No, wasn't you. So, again, I also have information, and I put this information at each person's place. It's from 2011. If you look at the very bottom, it says 2011 on it. This is the Bethany City Council roster of council members from the year 2011. And Councilmember Moore listed back in 2011 his place of business as his mailing address. So And the reason I mention that is that it's been said that his mail was being returned to the city when it was mailed to his address. Well, if you've asked for it not to go to your home, it would be returned if it wasn't the correct address. I'm just scanning over my notes here for just a moment. Bear with me. I did mention that someone had said that utilities were in Curtis's name at some of these other homes. As I stated, I have other homes and the utilities are in my name also. There's several other things here that I could go over. I hate to bring out everything that I have here to talk about. I feel like it's really to the point of the items that I mentioned earlier that we have to, that the attorney had gone over with me. I contacted him, and in these items, I think, again, I'm convinced that Curtis Moore is a resident of the city of Bethany.
Mayor, may I? Are you
Go ahead.
I agree with Kathy that, can you hear me okay? Okay. I don't normally speak loud enough, so I want to be sure. The mayor's provided quite a bit of information he believes substantiates a lack of Ward 1 residency by Mr. Moore. He has funded out of his pocket for a private investigator to look into Mr. Moore and his family activities, living quarters, and behaviors. He has attempted to talk to Mr. Moore in the company of two others besides because he believes Mr. Moore is no longer residing in Bethany, specifically in Ward 1. All these actions based on an unknown citizen's allegation. Mr. Moore has responded with what I consider an enormous amount of information, willingly, publicly opening up his personal and business activities, lifestyle, and in an attempt to prove he maintains residence in Ward 1 of the city of Bethany. After a call on Tuesday, just 2 days ago, informing me of an additional agenda items regarding this issue, I have spent numerous hours researching and receiving information in a totally different format than is normally providing for information for this council before any meeting. Rather than a packet 4 or 5 days ahead of time, this appears to be a very urgent matter. No printed material has been provided but sent electronically, piecemeal at best. I am somewhat dumbfounded as to why. Is this a life or death health situation, or is someone's well-being or safety at stake? The facts. The charter says each of us must, for 1 year prior to filing for a candidacy to hold office here in Bethany, we must be a registered voter and a resident of the ward. If residence ceases, the council seat ceases. Pure and simple. The allegation is Mr. Moore no longer resides in Ward 1 because the house on 30th Terrace is vacant and has had or has for sale a sign in front of it. Okay, so tell me, if I put a for sale sign in front of my house while I'm remodeling, and I'm willing to show the home while doing the remodeling, and because of the construction debris, my family and I stay with a neighbor down the street, you will throw me out of office? Furthermore, I choose to speculate in flipping and rent and lease properties because I want to increase my financial status. Or buy a home for one of my daughters who has recently divorced or lost her job, as two of them work in oil and gas. I take the furniture out of my house that I'm remodeling and move out to those locations. You assume I no longer live in a residence. However, I plan to stay where I am if the home doesn't sell. I continue to be a registered voter in my ward. My homestead remains at the remodeled in process, and my intent to remain in good standing as an elected official by will of the people and those that I represent. Even if my home sells and I move into another home or apartment or duplex within Ward 3. The Supreme Court cases back up the ability to be of residence with temporary absence. Every submission from the PI's report of ownership of properties to the Zillow County assessors and all the information only confirms Mr. Moore owns more than one property in more than one city, yet maintains his homestead, his voter registration, and no contrary submission of facts has been presented. Only speculation, hearsay, and assumptions are presented here. Mr. Moore has explanations for all of the allegations. All of the information presented by the mayor and his PI only show that CODIS owns and maintains 2 properties, both of which are on the market, which supports his financial problem with the Mustang lease house. He has not expressed an intent of moving from Ward 1. His voter registration remains unchanged. He in fact stays in his ward on occasion. The mayor's opinion of Curtis's intent has no value and is just that, an opinion. Owning and taking care of multiple properties is not a violation of our charter. I have been provided with the Supreme Court language regarding the residence, and I ask that you let me read this. The question of residence for voting purposes has been held to be synonymous with document file and involves a factual inquiry with the place where one is habitually present and to which, when he departs, he intends to return. The dominant element in determining a legal residence is the intention to abandon the former residence and to acquire another without the intention of returning. When the existence of a legal residence or domicile at a certain place has been shown, it will be presumed to continue until a contrary intention is shown. A person's intention as to the residence is a question of fact to be determined by the trier of the facts, which I understand is this horseshoe tonight, and is conclusive on appeal unless shown to be clearly against the weight of the evidence. One's place of present abode is only one of the factors which may be considered, but it cannot be regarded as conclusive. A temporary absence, even if it extends for a period of years, will not affect a change of residence, nor is the maintenance of a separate home inconsistent with the continuance of a person's legal residence in but one locality. Other factors which have been recognized as persuasive in determining intent are the holding of a local office, the exercise of the right to vote in local elections, business and domestic relations, community activities, personal habits, and other objective facts ordinarily manifesting the existence of intent. Mr. Moore has been forced into the position of providing a large amount of personal and financial information that is way above the call of duty. In my discussions with him about the Mustang house, he disclosed that the house was purchased as an investment to lease oil field executives that travel in and out of patches, specifically to some of the companies that are in Yukon and the west part of Oklahoma City. The oil crashed shortly after the purchase, and he needs to unload the house since it is now a negative cash flow. It is common practice for these corporations to lease houses for their principals and key personnel to use while they travel. This happened in Brownsville about a year ago. A construction supervisory team rented one of our houses just down the street from my home. It also happened when I worked for Standridge. We had hotel rooms, we had apartments, and we had houses for the people that were coming in from out of town. And they would stay a night or they would stay months. Mr. Moore has willingly provided more than the required financial and business-related personal information and documented witnesses to his actions and intent. I think that it boils down to what do we have documented? What does the law say? Our charter says we have to prove that he's not a resident. In my opinion, that has not been proven. Thank you for letting me speak.
Well, I would say that an abandoned house here and residents next door to a property you own stating that you are their neighbor would pretty much show that you have left the property which you own here.
We didn't
Mo-
get one.
Mr. Herron just tried to share audio
I didn't hear
recordings
a
with
word of it.
neighbors. Well, then play it again, John.
Let
I
me-
have provided in front
My
of you.
love life is nobody's
I have,
concern.
I have provided in front of you text messages when I went and knocked doors of a neighbor that I went up to the door, asked her who lived, if anybody had ever occupied the property. I'm not going to hear anything from the public. This is a meeting for the council to determine facts. If people are going to speak in here, try to speak over council members or myself, you're going to be asked to leave. When
Facts, you just
coming
say
onto
facts.
the doorstep, asking this person if it had ever been occupied, they said, yes, absolutely, it had been occupied. I asked if they knew who that was. The person couldn't remember, but said they would ask their spouse. I showed a picture of a vehicle, asked if this vehicle was a vehicle that had been in the driveway over there or they had ever seen. They said, well, send me the picture and I'll speak to my spouse about it. So text the picture to them. You see the chain that follows saying absolutely. Curtis Moore, the person on the City of Bethany's website, is the person that is indeed our neighbor, or was our neighbor. Confirmed the vehicle that he drives, and then went to another neighbor's doorstep, asked if the house had ever been occupied, and immediately he said, yeah, Curtis Moore used to live there. He lived there for several months, and he moved in with somebody, and they got divorced, and so he moved out.
You have a record of a divorce? Just curious.
I'm just saying what your neighbors said.
Okay, so it's hearsay, so you don't know.
Okay. Sure.
Did you use any of the city's funds when you used for that PI?
Mayor, can I ask Council Larson to clarify
ahead.
something that she just read? I'd like to know, and if you can go back to your notes.
Sure.
It was not quite halfway through, but maybe a little further than halfway through. It kind of described a length of residency or, and I can't quote it, I'm sorry, but it said you could have temporary, or you spoke about temporary residency up to a year or more.
There's
Can you
several-
repeat that
there's-
one
there's
for me,
several
clarification?
court cases that I have seen, and the Attorney Davis has sent some, and I have done some other research. And this particular one says, a person's intention as to residence is a question of fact to be determined by the trier of facts. It is conclusive upon appeal unless shown to be clearly against the weight of the evidence. One's place of present abode is only one of the factors which may be considered, but it cannot be regarded as conclusive. A temporary absence, even if it extends for a period of years, will not affect a change of residence. Now, some of the cases I've looked at, they have been divorce cases, they've been the Oklahoma Tax Commission. There was one case where the couple moved out of the country, and they were gone for 2 years, I think, and came back, and they were still considered to have had their residence in the United States where their home was. Now, in the election laws, the election board that I looked at, in cases pertaining to that, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to be, I'm just telling you what I've read, okay? And in those cases, it's keeping their, if they vote, if they have, the utilities is brought up in some cases, I'm trying to remember what else there is, the taxes, the deed. In this case, Mr. Moore's even provided a mortgage. That's my point here is that we have these people say, and we all have been in instances, the mayor himself has, not too many months ago, there's situations where anybody can say anything. What I'm trying to do to simplify my work and your work is look at the facts and the hardcore information that we have been given. And with that said, it boils down to, can we prove that Mr. Moore does not hold the title of residence by Oklahoma law?
May I add something, please? May I add something?
Sure.
This is just, again, to speak to the issue of having a recording of people saying that Mr. Moore lived next door to them for a while. I'm sure if you went to Tom Ray's lake house, where he spent 2 or 3 months out of every year there with his wife, and you went up to the neighbor's door and you said, "Who lives next door?" They'd say, "Tom Ray." And they'd say, "Yeah, he's my neighbor." You'd say, "What's his vehicle look like?" They'd know what his vehicle looked like. They'd know how long he'd been there. Again, I'm making those statements because it's not relevant to what we're looking at.
But I think there's a big difference when Mr. Ray is never had a house for sale here with no furniture in it and was staying only on the weekends at the lake. I mean, that I don't even know how that's germane to the situation, but when you
Mr.
have
Ray
a
might
house
just stay
here,
at the lake on
when
the
you have a
weekends.
house here that is completely void of furniture, has been for months and months, about the same time that you purchased a home in another community, and clearly moved into that home, according to all the neighbors, I mean, I would say that absolutely speaks to the fact of abandonment of property here and making another property your domicile.
I disagree with that in the fact that he did not abandon his home. He was refurbishing his home. He sent photographs of where he's refurbishing, for instance, the bathroom. It had the toilet removed from the ring and setting off to the side, to redo flooring. Whenever you redo flooring, you have to remove the toilet. It's hard to live in your home when you don't have a toilet, so it's not abandoned. He stayed at a friend's house in his ward during this time. And let me just mention, if I had a home in, let's say this home that he has in Mustang that they're referring to that he lived at, hey, I'd go spend time there too. I own it. I can spend some time there if I choose to. I can choose to spend months there if I choose to, but I'm still have one residence. You can only have one residence at a time, and if you're not in the process of changing where, all of your habits and all of those types of things, you're again, we must prove that he abandoned his home. Mayor, you keep using the term abandoned, but that's not, he did not abandon his house, so I'd rather you not use that adjective. We can use wordsmithing all we want and say things all we want, but it does not make it truth. Anytime, as I stated, that you're refurbishing your home and you can't use the bathroom in your home, you have to go somewhere else. There's other things, Mayor, that I really don't want to get into, but if you want to pursue this further and disagree in this, I can go into some other statements that I have here. And I'm just going to make this statement. There was a private eye that the mayor had following Curtis Moore and his family. It just makes me wonder if I have somebody following me. I've thought of that, and I just, anyway.
Well, if I could just continue on my, it seems that we've got something here tonight that I don't know if it could be proven according to, what David has sent us in emails, according to what Councilmember Larson has just presented. I understand hearsay. I understand, Curtis, I wouldn't live in a house that's being, well, I have for 20-something years, that's being remodeled.
You were much younger, and you didn't really deserve the niceties of life.
But I raised my three
and when you
boys in a
remodel
house
a
that was
home,
being
it gets to
remodeled.
be a pretty bad situation.
It is, it does.
Mr. Shire's been there and looked at it.
I've been there.
Yeah.
And I think I have, these dates that were pinched around, I think I have been to Mr. Moore's place in Bethany on 31st Street Terrace, or 30th Terrace, and he has been there.
But
And I have never failed to been able to talk to him.
But what I want to say is that I think we've got a task before us that's just about impossible to prove either way. And I guess what it boils down to, Curtis has done what he has seen fit in his own personal life to do, and I have to respect that. His choices have been made.
I don't know if
I have to
personal
respect
life
that.
anymore.
Well, you don't, no. And I don't know as we can prove either way if, Curtis, you have abandoned, all the legal stuff that Ms. Holloway was speaking of. It seems to me you can live just about anywhere you want to and still be a council member. I thought the moment that you stepped out of your home, moved to a different place, you were finished. But according to all this, David, correct me if I'm wrong, please, you can live just about anywhere for any amount of time and still be a resident? Is that correct, or are we?
Actually, what Ms. Holloway read to you is a correct statement of the law. There's no question about that. I don't really think there's any room to argue about what the law is. Where the rub comes in is how do you apply the law? Because the law says that in order to lose your residency, two things have to happen. The first thing that has to happen is you have to leave your residence permanently with no intent of returning. And secondly, you have to establish a new residence with the intent of making that your permanent home. So that's the legal definition of changing your residence, and there are hundreds of Oklahoma reported cases on that. Probably some of the ones most relevant to Bethany are voting cases where people have challenged votes that were cast in an election saying that someone wasn't a resident, and without exception, the Supreme Court has said that that's the rule. But there are cases where people have been gone for substantial periods of time, but their conduct did not demonstrate that they intended to abandon their home, even though they live somewhere else. A good example, one of the cases involved a person who I think was working in the oil field, and his job ranged from Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and Oklahoma. And they were from McAllister, and they lived with her parents, I believe, in McAllister. But they would spend as much as a year in Texas or New Mexico while he was working on the oil rig, really living in a trailer somewhere out at the site. And someone challenged that residency, and it was held that they never intended to abandon their original residency. So the difficulty is, how do you determine whether someone intended to abandon their residence? And obviously you can't look inside people's brain to figure out what their intent is. So what you have to use to determine intent, according to the courts, is you have to look at their conduct. And that was part of what Ms. Larson was reading to you. The courts have talked about voter registration, where you get your mail, whether you participate in local civic events, those kinds of things are some of the things that I think would show an intent to either abandon or not abandon. Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. And by virtue of if he did in fact buy this house and did in fact move into it for 2 or 3 months, according to what we're finding tonight, that's not a violation, is that correct?
Well, again,
I
it
mean,
just
is
has
it-
to do with what his intent was.
I mean, if he is
If you found
remodeling-
that he abandoned his house here with the intent not to come back, and if his intent was to move to Mustang and live there permanently, yes, he's abandoned his residence. If you don't find those things, he hasn't. I'd say that's the best way to answer
Well,
that
and
question.
without opening up that head of his and asking for intent, I mean, we won't know that.
I have a
I mean,
comment, if I might. I just don't see the urgency of acting on this tonight. I mean, I realize a motion is on the floor in a second, so we do have to vote on it. I would just ask Mr. Moore, at the time he does sell the house that is on the market in Bethany, that he would then let us know what he plans to do. Other than that, I don't think we can decide at this point that he has abandoned his residence. I mean, I was a missionary in Africa, but I was still voting in the United States. I was a student in another community, but I was still voting in the place I considered my home. So I just don't feel that we can make this decision tonight to, whatever it is, declare a vacancy when I don't believe we have a vacancy.
And let it be known, I mean, and believe what you want, don't believe what you don't want. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. You know, every bit of this started when a citizen came to me, and then and they hand you a bundle of things and say, "What are you going to do about this?" And I say, "Well, I don't know." And you start looking into it, and kind of some things do check out to seem to be true, and then. I did hire a PI at first just to help me wade through some things because they had access to records that I didn't have access to, and originally only paid for that. And then you have other members of, please don't interrupt. I'm not interrupting anybody else. I just asked that I be given my moment to speak, and then I'll give you yours. I mean, you wade through these things and you take the facts that are in front of you. You know, I mean, I hope that Mr. Moore never abandoned Bethany, and I hope that he never had the intent of doing so. I did try to have a meeting with him this week when I finally had everything put together. Well, I told you it was about direction, and I would say that's direction of where we're moving with whether or not you were a resident or not. That's exactly what I told you the meeting was about, was direction. But then when we meet and try to talk, it immediately becomes incredibly agitated to the point of cussing at me and telling me that, not wanting to offer up anything about what's going on. So, I mean, every bit of it could have just been avoided had we been able to discuss the matter. But that's not what happened. So, you know, I mean, I guess I can't speak to whether Curtis abandoned Bethany or not, other than, I mean, it does seem overwhelmingly that way when a house is vacant, it's on the market. Had that property sold when he was living in Mustang, I mean, what then would have been the case? I mean, it didn't. But he was living in Mustang, and I heard with my own ears people tell me that. Apparently, Mr. Herron has heard the same thing. So, you know, to me, that seems that way. That's why it was brought forward. That's why this agenda was amended, because if those accusations are true, I think it does need to be acted on. If they're not, then it can be put to bed. But, you know, dragging it out further doesn't seem right. So that's why it's on tonight's agenda.
Okay.
Go ahead,
I
Mr.
would
Moore.
like, pardon me, sir, I'm sorry. I would just like to make a few more statements. I appreciate your concern, sir. Don't take that as disrespect. To address the statement that the mayor just made about Curtis's reaction at the meeting, well, I try to put myself in other people's skin to see what that would be. So let me think here for just a minute. I've been told to come to City Hall for a meeting by the mayor, meeting with the mayor. Okay, fine. I'll come up and meet you. Whenever I get to the meeting, I walk into the room, and seated in the room is the city attorney and the city manager. And so I'm kind of going, well, what's going on? You know, this shock. I would be shocked. And then whenever the question would come up of, you know, why you're really there, what the reason you're really called there for, I think I would be angry, because why didn't you ask me about this whenever you were talking to me before we made the appointment? Why didn't you tell me what we were really going to be talking about? Then, you know, and Mayor, please, you know, I don't want to sound disrespectful. I just want, it seems like to hire a private investigator before talking to me or anybody else to find out what's really going on. Are you a resident? Are you not? What's your intentions? Are you getting ready to sell your house? Or are you not going to be a city council member anymore? I think that those are the questions that should have been brought up to Councilmember Moore, just out of respect as humans to each other, rather than, it seems to me that someone really wants Mr. Moore out of this council seat for some reason, because spending money out of your own pocket rather than not speaking to Mr. Moore first. And in fact, Mr. Mayor, you had stated that you really didn't want to mention this to Mr. Moore first because you wanted to prove that he was not a resident.
Well, I wanted proof, if it was, before I heard from him, to either deny or affirm that.
I don't know why we can't speak to each other and just
Well, if
talk to
I
each
thought that I
other.
was going to get a straight, honest answer, I probably would have.
I pray that we all on this council can talk to each other honestly and truthfully, and go on about the citizens' business, this great city of Bethany. I just humbly ask that. I only want what is best for this city.
Mr. Moore, let me publicly apologize to you for invading your privacy. We got 2 days to look at this. I did my due diligence. I went in, I looked at things for myself. After hearing the conversation with Ms. Larson, Mr. Davis, and Randy, and I have come into this with an open mind, they much more, I've read the legal description, I've read the legal stuff, but the open discussion has really just showed to me just a whole nother side. And so let me publicly apologize.
I call for the question.
Okay, we have a motion to abandon resolution number 1404.
Just, could I ask one question before you make this vote? The abandonment will mean
That's up to the person to call
that
the
it
question.
cannot be brought up again, or it cannot be brought up for a period of time, or it can be brought up next week.
Under your current city council rules, once an item is voted upon, it can only be reconsidered within 6 months if authorized by a majority vote of the city council. So 5 members could bring it up again, yes.
at any time.
Yes.
Mr. Moore, just a question. Are you doing the remodeling, or do you have somebody working
I'm
on it?
doing everything myself as I can. I had pneumonia for 2 months, and the house was never on the market. It was never listed with a realtor, ever. I put a for sale sign out there because I got arthritis, bad, and it's hard to do that work. It's hard to get on your knees. Randy's seen the tile work and stuff. Mr. Shire's seen what I'm dealing with. It was moved there in 1964. It's an old house, and it's a lot of work. It's more work than I can handle. Kids are grown and gone. I'm not moving out of Ward 1. My business is in Ward 1. I rent 2 offices in Ward 1. You know, my love life, I think, is a private matter. You know, but I mean, the Department of Justice has to know where I'm at all the time. If I change my residence, they know. I promise you, because of the licenses that I hold. So I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous.
I have several thoughts on this. If this was presented to Mr. Taylor by a citizen that had this information, how come it wasn't turned to the city to make their investigation, which would have been something more binding and something more, I think, professional than to hire a private detective to go out and creep through the woods and take pictures? And
Which, by the way, absolutely never happened. There was,
Say again,
I have no pictures from a PI, so that absolutely never
Okay,
happened.
well, you have no pictures from a PI. I've seen pictures here, pictures there.
Excuse me, doesn't calling for the question stop discussion?
If the person that called for the question would like it to.
But, you know, you may have no pictures, but part of his business is to take pictures. I cannot understand why the city manager was not notified of this when these people presented you with this letter, and it should have been taken to the city manager for investigation. I know.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Councilmember Shirey, do you mind if I go ahead and just mention again that the question, it's been called for a vote on the question, and I would like to go ahead and get to the other.
You'd like to get it done?
I-
I think we need to proceed, yes.
I appreciate
There's-
that, because
There's
we
more
have-
urgent
we have a
business in
full-
the city of Bethany.
Thank you
than a
very
witch
much.
hunt.
I like that. We need to get to the business of finding a new.
Please post your votes. Please post your votes.
To repeat.
It's a motion to abandon resolution number 1404. The second was by Mr. Shirey. You're calling for the question, please vote. Thank you.
Mayor, I would like to say that in answer to your question about what you should have done when you had a citizen complaint, is you acted on it, and I will give you credit for that. A lot of times, hindsight or others can quickly say, I would have done it a different way, or you should have done it a different way, so I will give you credit for at least answering to a citizen's complaint.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, consideration and review of submitted responses to requests for qualifications for city manager search professionals and possible selection of a firm for the search process. John, you can go if you want. Yeah. I'm going to call a quick recess. We'll reconvene in a few minutes. Submitted responses to requests for qualifications for city manager search professionals and possible selection of a firm for the selection process. I trust that each of you got your hard copies of what was sent into the city. I asked John to leave and not be a part of any of this process. I don't think it's appropriate for the current city manager to be in any way, shape, or form involved in the selection process of either the group to go search for or the person itself as his replacement. So I asked John to go ahead and step out. I'm just going to open the floor for discussion. I know there's been a few people that had hoped that maybe we would interview 3 people. Some would like to interview 2 people, or firms, I should say, from the group we received. Obviously, that is a choice of this council. So however this body votes, I guess that majority vote will dictate how many firms, and then where we go from there. I would like us to try to keep that to 2, if at all possible, just for the fact that interviewing 2 firms will be a little quicker. We can quicker make a choice off of that and move down the road. We are about a month out from Mr. Schugert, his retirement, so, and obviously this is going to be a multi-month process in order for us to get the applications in and sorted through with whoever we choose. So I'm going to open up the floor to whoever wants to speak.
Well, I'd like to just ask, since I am human, my first choice after reading through these is the SGR folks, although I did not find in here what their fee would be. And if any of you other folks saw that and I didn't, would you please let me know? Let us know or whatever.
I don't believe, Randy, that was in there.
Okay.
I didn't find
I
that
mean, I saw
either.
some ranges in these other ones,
So
of dollar
Since
ranges.
we can't open it until we make a decision on who's going to be interviewed, according to the RFQ.
Yeah, that was under separate envelope, I think is what I read.
Right. it's
So
under-
it was not in
We're
that.
not going to
Okay.
open it
Okay.
until we,
I saw some ranges in some of the other ones,
Right.
dollar ranges, but I didn't see, and I figured that was the case. We just have to get our
some of them
price.
talked about it. Some of them did talk
Yeah.
about it.
But it will also depend upon what we ask them to do. If we
Right.
want video interviews or whatever, then it's going to make a difference on cost.
And Councilmember Lester, I agree. SGR was honestly my first choice as well. The fact that they're in Keller, Texas, so they're geographically close. Secondly, the CEO of SGR, Ron Holyfield, is a former city manager himself. I don't remember offhand what city he was a CM for, but I mean, I figure somebody that's lived and breathed that work ought to know pretty well who would be a good candidate for someone. They have placed several city managers in Oklahoma and currently have one in progress in Stillwater. And they also have a satellite office in Stillwater, so they have somebody here. What I thought interesting in their proposal was that the CEO himself gave his cell phone, stating that he would be a contact, and if we needed to get a hold of him and had questions, that he would be one of the lead point people to be able to get in touch with, even though there would be other people assigned to dig through and do the work needed, that he was that integrally involved. And I believe they're a pretty good-sized company, do a lot of work. I think they admit themselves they're the second largest in the United States under government search firms.
The senior vice president lives in Stillwater, Oklahoma. He's a graduate of University of Oklahoma with his MBA in Oklahoma State, so at least has local roots. And prior to this, from 2007 to 2013, he was senior vice president of the Mercer Group. And if we feel it necessary to bring in 2 groups, I would recommend Mercer as the second group, and they do have an office in Santa Fe.
I went through and used the scoring process since I was familiar with it. And I had 3 of them that I rated with their wow factors up to 96 and 95%. Unfortunately, I didn't rate Mercer that high because they referred to us as the county instead of the city. And I'm thinking if they can't get it right to begin with, I'm not going to waste my time. So that was my reasoning behind that. The three that I rated high, of course, was SGR. Novak, let me back up to SGR. What I liked about them was their time frame. I liked their presentation. I liked what they had to say. Novak, they are an engaging company. I didn't, there were about three of the RFQ responses that talked about engaging with the public. I think we need to discuss that. They were also one of the few, both Novak and SGR and WNC, that would be the Watterson Company. They all could do their search within a 90-day time. So those three were my highest. So I would make those three. I would highly recommend and agree with the mayor that at least two, but I'm almost inclined to think it wouldn't hurt to have three. And the interviews, she can limit them.
Sure.
Be very specific on what we want from them. They'll do the details later. And if we do our homework and line out what we want to begin with, it'll save us our time, their time, and it'll save costs. Just my recommendation.
So those are in order, SGR, Novak, WNC?
The Watterson Company.
Yeah, okay.
I had to abbreviate.
No problem. Well, it's actually abbreviated that way on their proposal, too. So, I mean, so far, it looks like SGR is coming in first with everybody that's spoke. Does anybody else want to share their thoughts?
I would like to go ahead with the interviewing the three that was mentioned.
So the three that Ms. Larson mentioned, or?
There's actually been four mentioned.
Yeah.
Arleta mentioned Mercer. I mentioned Novak, SGR, and Watterson
Yeah,
Company.
that's the three that,
The three that I had
Yes.
rated the highest were Novak, SGR, and Watering Company.
Yeah.
Watterson.
And
yes.
so yours would be in the same order, Ms. Holloway? Okay. And, you know, to be completely honest, I don't know that we could mess up with any of the proposals we got. I mean, I think they're all pretty good companies. I mean, there's some that I think have disadvantages, be it logistically being in Florida or, you know, whatever it is. I mean, that doesn't mean that they can't do an excellent job for us. But by the same token, if you're recruiting geographically as a recruiter, which I'm sure a good portion of what they have is local, I don't know of too many people that would probably want to move from Florida to Oklahoma, but
Novak and Watterson Company, Novak was in Ohio, but they had several Oklahoma
Cincinnati,
companies.
yeah.
And the WNC Watterson Company was in Minnesota. Mercer's in New Mexico. SGR's in Texas. They're the closest. But the Florida and actually the CHC was in Texas also, but I had a concern about, they did give a general idea about many, and their time frame was of concern to me. They had an excellent warranty, but the money and the time frame was an issue with the, what is that? Like I said, I had Christian Hartung Consultants.
Yeah.
well, I believe Mercer's warranty was really good too. Like if they weren't there 2 years, I think they'll do the search for you again for free.
All of them will.
Yeah.
All of them will.
Yeah. But they seem to really be out front with, you know, that they've had a good track record with people staying there. Of course, I mean, the City Managers Association, their kind of ethics rules, I mean, generally dictate that you stay someplace 2 years. Of course, I don't think any of them will quote-unquote poach the people that they place within your organization. They stay away from them as far as communication on other opportunities or anything like that. So you don't have to worry with, I don't think, any of them, with them trying to come back and find a better deal for somebody or, whatever that would be.
Mercer was good, except that it boiled down to when you're doing this many RFQs, if they're not gonna follow your RFQ requirements and they're not gonna proof their work and they're not gonna call you a city, then I'm sorry, if I've got even 8 of them to look at, I'm gonna weed them out when they don't follow the rules. If they're not gonna do it now, they're gonna do it later.
And I agree with that, and we use that for the library board, and that worked really well we got an excellent company
Yes, we
from
did.
following that.
There we go.
Well, and two, to follow up with your menial type thing, did it bother anybody else? I mean, there had this little thing here on the corner, but you open it up and I don't know if you'd have to do something to get that out, but you can't see the interior.
It was definitely a cheaper presentation, if
Yeah,
you will.
But,
Not as
that's
professional.
just like, I was sitting there thinking, really? But
What kind of contraption
what
is
kind
this?
of thing,
I do want
Is
to
this an
say.
eject
Right.
switch?
We had another, I did hear, and I think the mayor probably knows this, we had another company that did send an RFQ, but they mailed it on 5 hours before it was due here, and they were in Georgia or someplace. So obviously, it didn't get here within the time.
And again, if you can't follow simple directions,
And then the other one didn't have enough copies to go around. They had to provide 10 copies, and they provided 3.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be in town and saw it. And so, unfortunately, again, if you don't follow the rules, and so if we're going to do that with them, I really think we need to do that here too.
yeah,
So.
I don't disagree.
Well, I had another point on the SGR, on section 3 of the SGR pages, they have collaborative partners, or partnerships with those is the Oklahoma Municipal League and the City Manager Association of Oklahoma. And then they also have 300 local government clients in 41 states for recruitment, training, and leadership development. And so if they can't find you one, it looks as though they can recruit, train, and
Yeah.
make you one.
Right.
And that's pretty impressive. And I think it's imperative that we find somebody who understands the Oklahoma tax structures and the Oklahoma laws that we have to sometime abide by that are handed down to us.
Well, I think that's extremely important because I've heard stories of people moving across state lines in city management work, moving into moving from Texas into Oklahoma, and the tax structure being so different, not realizing when they took the job the issues that were going to be they were going to be facing. In that they can't use property taxes to fund general government, as we, here in Oklahoma, it's only sales tax. So, having a firm that obviously has done work here, offices here, understands those hurdles is important.
That's an excellent point that you just brought up about the people that we should be looking at should have a pretty close base to the state of Oklahoma. We've hired the people to work on our comprehensive plan that were out of Colorado, and there's some things that they didn't understand about the state of Oklahoma and our local requirements here that would have saved them and us a lot of money.
And even if somebody comes from out of state, as long as they understand what they're going into, as long as somebody has explained the way it works here, then you know what you're working with when you make that decision to uproot your family and move here, or maybe it's just yourself, but at least you know coming into it the entire hand that's being dealt, not just a portion of it, which like I said, I've heard horror stories of people not realizing what they were up against and pretty quickly leaving and going back to where they came from just because, or at least the state they came from, because they were so overwhelmed with how different things were in Oklahoma. And that's not to say somebody has to come from Oklahoma, just they have to know what they're getting into.
The laws in Oklahoma are a little weird, and, you know, right now, we probably need a constitutional convention to get within the present 200-year years that we are out of compliance, I think. And we need to look at that particularly when choosing somebody to find us some people to work. And there may be some people that are local that don't use one of these firms. Are we going to have any prospect of looking at people that do not use this
Yeah, I mean,
firm?
I think the plan would be to advertise that in multiple places that don't necessarily have, I mean, I would think this firm would then not just say, well, we're going to use our internal resources, but advertise it in other journals that are either city manager groups that, you know, city managers are members of within those organizations, like the ICMA and things like that, the Oklahoma group of city managers. You know, hopefully you would put that in. OML has a Cities and Towns publication that typically has jobs listed in there. So, you know, hopefully it would be in that. So, which those would be things that I mean, any city manager, I would say, that's worth his weight in salt would be reading those publications, not necessarily for looking for a job, but be involved in that.
But it would refer them to the search firm.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we
us.
wouldn't then take
Yeah.
that. We would take, I mean, we would encourage them to submit their resume to the firm so that the firm can help us whittle that down. But
That's what I'm speaking mainly.
yeah,
These guys don't send us a list of people that they've had on their books
No.
for 6 months and say, well,
Right.
this is what we have.
hopefully they'll hit their list, but also hit things that aren't on their list. Like I said, those publications, those places that city managers would be looking, that are looking to make a job change.
One of the things that SGR does that the other companies didn't seem to do, all of them talked about being nationwide searches. With the exception of Mercer, they emphasized more Midwest
Right.
regional. But one of the things that made SGR stand out was their management profile that they do. I think all of them do a management profile. SGR does it a little more extensively, it looks like.
Yeah, that's the one you were talking about.
Anytime you're going to do something more and better, it's probably going to cost us more, but you also sometimes get a better product. So I think that's one reason that I think, because they're all different, even though they do the same thing, that's why I'm pushing first to have three instead of two, because I think you need to see, if you just have black and white, that there is a gray. And I think you will have that if you have three candidates. That's just my suggestion.
There's a lot in 8 of these proposals that can slip by you over a period of time that you have to read them in.
Well, one of the reasons I picked the ones I did was because some of them were talking about 120 days or 180 days, and I didn't feel that anything over 90 days was necessary or that we had that much time, since we only have 6 months. And if it turns out on the first run, all of them had said, if they don't bring us somebody that we're happy with or we are comfortable with initially, then they'll go out and do the search again. If we hire somebody and over a 2-year period, they don't work out for whatever reason, they leave of their own accord, or we're not a good mix or whatever, then the companies will all come back. And some of them will come back at no charge, and some of them will come back at no charge except for expenses. So those are the kinds of things, all of them will offer that. So these 3 offered the best warranty, and the time frame was the shortest on those 3.
Well, I had the same top 3, but I'm not sure, can't remember what the order, but SGR was my top, and then I had the Waters and Novak. One of the things that I jotted down about SGR that I liked, and everybody has commented on some of these things, was their subscriber base to their newsletter, their job board. They have somebody on staff that monitors social media and will review the social media. I mean, that's just something that today's world you have to do. So,
Yeah.
As a former English major, I will bow to the critique and take Mercer off the list.
I wasn't asking you to do that. I was just justifying mine.
Quite frankly, I would be happy just bringing SGR in, but I know sometimes that doesn't look good when you just consider one. So we could rank them to, if we weren't happy with one, then bring in a second one. If we weren't happy with them, bring in a third one. Or we could just choose 3 and bring them all in and make a decision.
If you were pulling Mercer off, who was your fourth, or did you rank that far, or third, or? I only had 2 down for you.
But I didn't bring, I ranked them, but I didn't bring them with me.
Okay.
I had, actually, my third was the one from Florida, Bainsiger.
Wow, okay.
In kind of addressing about bringing the companies in one at a time, I'd rather bring them all in at once, and that way it's all fresh on your mind. You can kind of, and then whenever you tell them, if you send out a letter, no, you hate to tell one no, and then the next 2 are not quite what you want.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Well, that is it's a fantastic process to bring in those, like we did on the library, bring them in, and we sit in each one that we interview, there's something else that we learn and apply to the next one. And that process is really neat because you can sit there and you can look the people in the eye that potentially will be representing you and doing your legwork.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pretty much ask them anything you want to, anything you need to, anything that crosses your brain. It's a really neat process. And so I think if you just line 3 of them up, whichever 3 the council chooses, and bring them in on a certain day, I don't know, are we going to have an entire council interview process, or are there going to be a committee, or how do you guys prefer to do it?
We can do it however. My plan was just to have the whole council involved throughout the whole process. I just think that's the
appreciate that.
easiest, cleanest way to do it. We don't have to have a committee here and then report to.
I agree.
We can all hear it for ourselves, and hopefully those things can be scheduled when everyone can be there. I mean, it's going to be maybe difficult to get that done, but hopefully, those can be at times when, or we can find a time that everyone can be a part of hearing that interview. I think that's
Is that a public
important.
meeting?
I'd defer to David. I don't know if that'd be an executive session, whether that meeting would be a open meeting or an executive session, or how we would want to do that.
It would be an open meeting.
Okay, so absolutely. And I figured it would be. I wanted to defer to legal.
I appreciate your comments on that, Mayor. And, if at least it affords every council member the opportunity to hear and see, and if we can't all make it, and, we all have different things going
Yeah.
on, but at least it gives us the opportunity to be available
Right.
on the day that we would visit with all of them, because this is very important to each one of us. This city manager position, we're going to each one have to work very closely
Sure.
with him or her, and so
Well,
I
and their
appreciate that we're
leadership's
all
important
involved.
for our staff, and, honestly, the direction that the city continues forward, even though we set policy, those day-to-day operations and how the city is run is the choice of the manager. So, it is important that the correct person be chosen for that. So, Mr. Herron or Shirey or Moore, do you have any specific comments as to an order that you would like?
My first pick is definitely SGR. Based on their 75 subscribers, how they email out, their database, and the media searching Facebook, all the different types of media searches to have a better understanding of who they are.
And while obviously it's not foolproof, they do one of the more extensive background checks that I saw in there, that 10-page document of checking somebody, everything from their literal credit history to criminal background to everything. I mean, they try to dig as deep as they can into who this person really is. And that's not to say that, stuff doesn't fall through the cracks or somebody doesn't hide something, but I think, I mean, they do, it looks like to me, they do every effort possible to try to truly present to you who this person really is.
So we can expect somebody that's been vetted properly, that we don't waste our time up front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's under tab,
That's absolutely necessary.
And we get recorded interviews.
12.
And there are several of them that do that.
Right. Yeah, tab 12 on SGR is their first check applicant screening, and it's a 10-page document, very thorough. I mean, there were several others that I know that I looked specifically at that, and it was a much shorter background check than this seemingly is. So, and I think that's important to know who you're really dealing with.
I didn't notice, and I
Bless you.
can't seem to find, though, on any pending litigation or regulatory action on any of those three. Can somebody speak to that on Novak, SGR, and WNC?
Whether they have
Waters
pending,
and Company and Novak.
Yeah, did any of them have pending litigation against them at all? Did they?
None of the companies did.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question about the opening of the structure fee envelopes. The RFQs that were sent out. Okay. It says, provide a complete description of the fee structure at the firm. The fee structure shall be included in a separate sealed envelope. Only the fee structure envelope of the successful respondent will be open. So am I to understand that whoever we choose to interview, they will be opened, or is it after the interviews?
It sounds like, was that in the?
but that was in
bid
our
specs?
RFQ, yes.
Let me look at it, Mr. Mayor. It sounds like from what you read that Maybe,
It's marked with an asterisk.
maybe only after they're selected.
Well, we're selecting them for interviews, not selecting them to hire, so I'm trying to
Bit
get
of a techni-
No, I don't
clarification.
think
Bit of a
what you
technicality
meant.
there.
After you've conducted the interview. And where is, I'm not, oh, yeah, here it is.
Yeah, right there with the X.
I think as part of the interview, we would ask them to explain their fee structure.
Yeah, they could explain
and
their
what
fee
that
at that.
includes.
We do the same thing with almost all professionals when we
Well,
solicit
Our selection process is pretty spelled out here.
with engineering companies, architecture firms. We do the same thing. We don't ask for a fee quote until we select the one we feel is most qualified, then we
The one.
negotiate a fee.
Just the
And-
one. Okay.
Ms. Holloway,
And then
that's-
we're not gonna know what the others,
And all these fees are negotiable.
and we won't know on the others ever, because we won't be opening those envelopes.
Correct.
Okay.
That's under section, it's under 4C12 was where what she was speaking about was.
That's almost verbatim from what you see in our engineering proposals.
Right.
Architectural and those kind of.
Mr. Lester was talking about the interview process that we had with the library, and I can attest to, on paper, one particular company I was really on board. I wanted this company to do it. I wasn't vocally saying that, but down here I wanted them to. But when they got in front of that podium right there, the whole scenario changed. And so when, if you bring in 2 or 3 different companies, then you're going to get their personalities. You're going to have to be working with them over the next few months.
Yeah.
You want to be sure that all 9 of us, for the most part, can get along with them and understand the process.
Yeah, number 1 may become number 3. I mean, you just don't know until you
There you
talk.
go.
Right.
Right. So I really think that you need to really think about that.
I don't disagree at all. Mr. Herron, did you have a second one that stood out to you, or?
Well, my second was the Mercer.
Mercer, okay.
Yep. But I was not an
And I mean, obviously, nor was I. And obviously, SGR has come up, looks like one on everybody that has spoken about it. So, I mean, I think they're obviously going to be one that is going to make that cut. But WNC and Novak are, I mean, people have mentioned those 3 times each, with Novak being the second on two people's, and third on another's. So does it, Mr. Shirey, did you want to give a specific ranking or
Yes,
order?
The SGR was probably my first choice.
Okay.
Not probably, it is my first choice.
Okay.
They seem to have a very good presence in our local area.
Absolutely.
Which gives us some, their understanding of that. The only other would be L&C, and they're kind of generic to me.
WNC, you mean?
WNC,
Waters and Company.
Yeah, Waters and
Waters
Company.
and
They're just kind of a generic company. But there's been some things said that possibly. But that's the only thing that I would.
Mr. Shirey?
I mean, 3 is where we're at right
Did you
now.
say SGR, Novak, and WNC?
I didn't.
He didn't mention
what-
Novak.
No, I didn't say Novak. I said WNC would be who I would, the number one choice would be.
Also known as L&C,
SGR,
apparently.
and the number two choice is WNC, and I would prefer in that order.
My third would be the WNC also.
Okay. Mr. Moore, did you have a specific order, or?
SGR, Novak, and WNC probably.
Okay. I mean, according to what I have tallied up here, then SGR, Novak, and WNC would be the 3, if the council chose to do 3, that are overwhelming on what everybody's saying. And I guess ranking at that point makes no difference if we're going to interview 3. So does somebody want to, is there other discussion? I mean, do we want to continue to discuss it, or do we want to vote to bring those 3 firms in? And then we'll need to quickly decide.
I'd make a motion
Okay,
that we contact Novak, SGR, and Waters and Company to schedule interviews.
okay,
And I would also like to include that I found that one of the things that I think is a good business to do for the city is contact all these people that have sent their RFQs in, and let them know that the
Absolutely.
decision has been made, and thank them. And I have a form letter that I've already prepared if you would like to use those. And then, once we decide when we're going to schedule the interviews, we would need to do that to send the letter also, and let them know that they've been successffully.
Correct.
If I
So-
might say something on that, you made a word in their schedule. I think we should use the word coordinate a interview with them and tell them to send us times back that they could put them together, and then we would put them together and go back at them with a date so that we could all have
To
this at
save
one
time, if you set the time.
Yes.
And they want to be interviewed, they already know what our time frame
Okay,
is.
then
You
we
tell
need to-
them when it is, and you schedule them for a certain amount of time,
wanna
and
do
you
that,
schedule all
that would be
3 of
fine.
them, and they come in one right after the other.
That's not what the motion was said.
That's my recommendation.
Can we limit the motion we're voting on to the 3, and then the rest are kind of logistics
Yeah,
and how to
right,
deal with it?
I agree, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, I second the motion.
Thank you.
okay. Is there any other questions or discussion? So it's simply a motion to interview SGR, Novak, and W&C, which is Waters and Company. And we have a second on that. Is there any other questions or discussion, council?
Could I, excuse me, did we, during the library process, did we submit possible questions that we were going to present to the interviewees?
We had a criteria that we gave them that with the letter. And those, and basically that's already done for us in this. So that really should go with a successful letter, and be sure that they know that you need to be, if you don't set the criteria firmly, they'll go off in left field. That's why we did it that way.
It's more structured that way.
We
Yeah,
did
and-
leave one, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, no.
I was going to say that we did leave a little bit of time,
15 minutes,
Yeah,
7 minutes, I think it was 7
something
minutes.
like that, 7 minutes
At
for
the
them
end.
just to
Ramble.
say what they
That
needed to
was
say.
for them to sell
that hadn't been
themselves.
said.
Yeah.
Or ask questions of us.
Sure. Okay, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Please post your votes. Okay, excellent. All right, well, that is all that is on tonight's agenda, so if there is no objection, I will declare us adjourned.
Mr. Mayor, could we have that last agenda printed out and sent either by email stating what that was on that question? The time periods, we're going to put a certain date down, and I'd like to have a good idea of what's going on that so that we don't get bogged down. I'd like to have it done as quick as possible,
Okay, absolutely.
and I'd like it sent out.
Okay. Without objection, we are adjourned.